radiography, it's evaluation of the uterus and the bilateral fallopian tubes under fluoroscopic guidance. So now what are the indications? You tell me what are the indications that can be for where this HSG can be done. Just grossly, any idea? In case of main rule is in case of infertility. Another rule is in case of recurrent spontaneous abortion. Why do you think in case of recurrent spontaneous abortion? While putting the dye inside the uterus, and then you take an X-ray, what will you find? If there is some polyp, there will be some filling defect. Or another thing, that there might be intrauterine adhesions, there might be intrauterine synecdoche formation. So there will be filling defects. Then also you know that there is some intrauterine pathology for which there is recurrent pregnancy loss. That is why we are doing this HSG. Then congenital uterine anomalies. Congenital uterine anomaly is what? Uterine septum. Then post-operative evaluation following tubal ligation. Suppose you have done tubal ligation and now you want to know whether the ligation procedure you have done is successful or not. Then what will you do? You will push the dye and take an X-ray of the abdomen, and then what will you find? The dye has not spilled, that up to the portion the tube has been ligated, the dye will go up to that part. So you know up to that part the tubes are ligated, the operation has been successful. Had that dye been spilled, then that means what? That means the OT is not successful. Another, not only bilateral tubal ligation, in case of bilateral tubal occlusion, that is Essure. We use an Essure ring and we put the Essure ring inside the tubes, inside the ischiocornual junction, we just put the Essure ring. And then for confirmation of the procedure, we ask the patient to come after 3 months. And after 3 months, what we do? We do the same dye test, that is HSG we do, and see whether the dye is getting spilled or not. Mostly not for tubal ligation, mostly it is done for Essure procedure to confirmation whether the procedure has been successful or not. Because what happens when we put the Essure ring inside the tubes, what it does, the Essure ring, what it does, it incites a foreign body reaction. As a result, there will be inflammation, and as a result, there will be tubal occlusion. So whether this occlusion has been completed or not, we check by putting the dye and taking an X-ray. This is plain and simple basic of HSG, that is it. And in case of suspected genital tuberculosis, is written but practically it is not done. For diagnosis of genital tuberculosis, we don't do. So what are the indications of HSG? Someone summarize. One for primary infertility. Second was for spontaneous abortions. Third was for congenital uterine anomalies. Fourth was for confirmation of the bilateral tubal ligation, most commonly for Essure procedure, whatever we have done. Now what are the contraindications? Where will you not do HSG? Yes, then undiagnosed vaginal bleeding, because you might be dealing with an ectopic pregnancy, PID, and then infections, active infections. Whenever you are telling active genital PID, genital pelvic inflammatory disease, active genital TB, active sexually transmitted disease, whatever that is active, previous history doesn't have any effect on this. And then active vaginal bleeding, suspected pregnancy, then any what you put inside the anaphylaxis or dye. If she is having any dye allergy, if you know it already, then you do not do. Before the ovulation, that is 10 to 12 days. Generally, we ask the patient to come on day 6 or day 8 of her menstruation, and up to day 10 or day 12, we can do that. Because why day 6, day 8? Because already her menstruation has been done and menstruation is over, and there is less chances of getting pregnant, as well as what happens, the internal os and the external os are already dilated. Then the question arises, why can't you do it during menstruation? You could have done it during menstruation as well. One thing is, during active vaginal bleeding, we don't do it, because whether it is a menstruation or whether there is some undiagnosed pregnancy which is getting aborted, you don't know. And secondly, what happens, while you put the dye, you just put it under pressure. You just put a lot of pressure and push the dye inside the uterus, and there is already blood inside. So what will you do? You will push the blood outside the uterine cavity through the fallopian tubes into the peritoneum. So as a result, what will you cause? You will cause iatrogenic endometriosis. You will put the endometrial cells outside into the peritoneal cavity, and it causes implantation over there, and it causes endometriosis as well. And as well as what happens is, under pressure, what are you doing? You are basically inserting infections as well. During menstruation, already everything is dilated and there is a highly vascular at that point of time. So, you do not want to injure any structure, you do not want to, the patient who get infected, as well as you do not want iatrogenic endometriosis, as well as active vaginal bleeding is already a contraindication for doing HSG. That is why day 6 to day 12. And after day 12 you do not do, because there is high chances the patient might have ovulated and pregnancy gets disturbed, or the ovum whatever is there, it will get disturbed. So, see, this is done in the first half of the menstrual cycle, generally proliferative phase between 8 to 12 day. Patient is asked to avoid unprotected sexual intercourse from the date of her period until the investigation is over. And if periods are irregular, do a beta HCG test to rule out the pregnancy. That is very important. First of all, you rule out the pregnancy and then you do the test. Then exclude any active pelvic infections. Why? Because you have to rule out all the contraindications. Whatever the contraindication is there, you have to rule out that. And prophylactic antibiotics are generally not recommended. But if the patient is having some predisposing factors like bacterial endocarditis is there, and now if you try to do some procedure, these patients are already prone for all these infections. In that case, you have to give her prophylactic antibiotics. Otherwise, routinely we do not give prophylactic antibiotics. Before the procedure, we do not give any antibiotics. After the procedure, it is given. So, now how the procedure is done? Have you seen HSG before? So, informed consent is taken. We have to inform the patient that it is kind of a painful procedure, but it will subside, and she has to lie down and she will be exposed to some degrees of radiations, but that radiation is not this ovarian toxic or nothing will be there. And then a dye will be pushed. If she has any contraindication, she has to explain, she has to tell you that, so that you do not do the procedure. And then what happens, the patient is asked to empty her bladder immediately before the procedure. Then she has to lie in a lithotomy position and the perineum is cleaned with an antiseptic solution and draped with a sterile towel. What happens is, see, the patient will lie down in a lithotomy position. You will do antiseptic dressing and draping the way you do. And then what will you do? You will put the Sims speculum in the posterior vaginal wall and retract the posterior vaginal wall. And after that, what happens? Suppose this is your introitus. You put the Sims speculum in the posterior vaginal wall. As a result, what will you see? You can see the external os. You have already cleaned the patient. Now you will hold the anterior lip of the cervix using a Valsalm or an Ellis tissue holding force. We will pull it towards you. And then slowly you will dilate the os, external os and the internal os using serial Hager's dilators. Slowly you will dilate. And after that, when you see that it has been dilated up to the point that your HSG cannula can pass through in a corkscrew manner, you take the HSG cannula and using a corkscrew fashion, you just try to rotate the HSG cannula in a manner that it gets inside the cervix. And how will you ensure that it is well fitted inside the cervix? You will just, after you have inserted the HSG cannula, you will give a gentle pull. You will see the HSG cannula is stuck inside the cervix. It is not coming out easily. You just give a gentle pull. With a gentle pull, the HSG cannula won't come out easily. So, now you know that it is in place. Now, you will take 10 cc syringe, and in that 10 cc syringe, what will you take? You will take the dye. We will come about the dye. How much dye you will take? You will take 10 ml of dye. Why 10 ml? Now the question comes, why 10 ml? Because, yes, the volume of the uterus is 3 ml, and next 3 ml is used for these tubes. So you will 3 plus 3 you will take for 6 ml you have already taken for this uterus and the filling of the tubes, and rest remaining is for the checking whether this bilateral spillage is there or not. So that is a division. Why 10 ml? What is this is the explanation for 10 ml. And then you position the patient and then you push the dye. First 6 ml you push and one film is taken, and then remaining and the radiologist, this technician, whoever is watching it, he will inform you, okay fine, there is some spillage or there is no spillage, and he will ask you to give the remaining dye. You will give the remaining, another film will be taken, and then you will read the plates and see what has happened. So first, when the patient is lying down, first one control film is taken. What is, see, it is written that The patient is placed in lithotomy position and one scout film may be taken. That is, scout film is control film. That you have given no dye, nothing. The patient is in lithotomy position and one plain and simple lower abdominal X-ray is given and taken so as to know whether the normal anatomy or whatever is there. If anything radio-opaque material is there or whatever is there, you just know. And then you give the dye and check what has happened. See, a speculum is inserted into the vagina, cervix is cannulated with any of the available cannula which is made air-free before administration of the contrast. Another thing is like while preparing the patient, you have cleaned everything and then you have to check the HSG cannula whether it is air-free or not. Now see, a tenaculum is used to hold the anterior lip of cervix. A speculum is removed and the patient is placed in slight intraligmal position and contrast is slowly given. See, 3 ml contrast is used to fill the uterine cavity, another 3 ml is to fill the tube up to 10 ml and 4 spot films are taken. Additional films can be taken if you cannot see the bilateral spillage or if there is any kind of doubt that whether the dye has spilled out or not. And at the end of the procedure, antibiotic course is given and the patient is informed about vaginal spotting for 1 to 2 days. Since you have manipulated the uterus as well as the cervix and held the cervix, anterior lip of the cervix with the tissue holding force, it is already traumatized. So, there will be some bleeding, but you have to assure the patient that there is nothing to worry, it will go off spontaneously. You have nothing to do with that. Now, what can be the complication? Sometimes the patient screams of so much of pain that you have to abandon the procedure. Infection might be there and bleeding might be there. If you do not position it or if you do not hold the uterus and the cervix in a proper manner or you put excessive pressure while dilating the internal os and the external os, you might even perforate the uterus. So, see, there might be bleeding, infection, a pregnancy irradiation, vasovagal episode. Because of the pain that there is vasovagal episode and uterine perforations as well. An allergic reaction due to this iodinated contrast material. So, the dye we nowadays use is the, yes, not the lipid actually. Previously, what we used to use is this lipiodol. And now lipiodol is nothing but 40% iodine in poppy seed oil. Nowadays, water-based materials as you see. What is the difference? Lipid soluble contrast was better. It used to create less pain, it was less pain, sharp image was there, everything. Even some previous practitioners used to use these lipid soluble dyes because what happens is lipid is dense fluid, right? When you put this dense fluid under pressure, what happens, even if there was some minor blocks in the tubes, that used to get opened up. So, that was that another school of thought that people used to prefer this lipid solution, lipid wala dyes. But with the research and everything, what happened is this intravasation of this contrast material and there was a very high risk of this oil embolism. This was the main risk factors. Many patients used to land up in this oil embolism and there was risk of lipogranuloma formation in case of tubal block or hydrosalpinx. Because see, water soluble dyes, what happens? It gets absorbed, right? Even if there is a block, either it will come out or it will get absorbed. Even if it gets absorbed, nothing bad is going to happen. But suppose a oil, which is a dense fluid kind of a structure, if that gets absorbed, it will take more time to get absorbed, as well as allergic reactions were more, as well as what happened is this kind of a oil embolism, chances of oil embolism was more. But what was the advantages was pregnancy rates were doubled and pain was minimal, images were very sharp. These were the advantages, but disadvantage part was much more. The risk benefit, when you compare the risk benefit ratio, the risks were much more. In case of oil embolism, you cannot do anything. So, patients were landing up in shock and everything. So, that is why this lipiodol was abandoned and nowadays what we use is the water soluble contrast material, that is iohexol. This is basically water soluble iodine based contrast material what we use. This is widely used and this is preferred. This see, this everything is visualized well, even gets absorbed within hours, does not leave any residue. Granuloma formation rarely. I to never found any patients having granuloma formation. Even pain persists after the procedure, but that is very nominal and with normal painkillers only it goes away. And prompt demonstration of tubal patency and delayed film will not needed. So, basically nowadays this water soluble contrast material is being used and that is the most preferred also. Oil based we do not use nowadays. So, just remember two names. Basically, this lipid soluble material, if you want to name one, that is lipiodol. and water soluble is iohexol. And now the examiner asked which one is better. Obviously this water soluble is better. Now what are the different instruments used? See, this is the Leach-Wilkinson cannula I was talking about. See, through this you have to pass normal saline and check for the patency of this tube. And this tube, on the body of this tube, there are screw-like markings, so that you put it in a corkscrew pattern inside the cervix and pull it gently, so that you can see that whether it has reached the cervix in a proper manner or not. Then tenaculum, if you get a tenaculum, fine, or else what we use is valsalum or Ellis tissue holding forceps for holding the anterior lip of the cervix. This is the Hager's dilator. What is the use of Hager's dilator? To dilate the cervix. And this is the speculum. Most importantly, we do not use Cusco. This is Cusco. We use the Sen speculum. And sponge holder for cleaning, dressing and dripping. Now, what are the different types of cannulas? Most commonly, whatever we are using or whatever you will get in the exam, whatever specimen, whatever it is, you will always get Leach-Wilkinson cannula. These are only of historical importance. Nobody uses this. Now, which one is better, superior? Need for reapplying the cannula? Cervical vacuum cup has never been used. Metallic cannula only we use nowadays. This is the thing. This is the cervical vacuum cup, but we never use this. This is also never used. Balloon catheter. This is a normal HSG, how a HSG looks like. This is the cervix. See, these are the Leach-Wilkinson cannula has entered. This is the uterus. This is a normal triangular shaped normal uterus having bilateral fallopian tube, and the dye has peeled very well. See. So, whenever this kind of a plate is given to you, you will always say this is a hysterosalpingogram showing the uterus and the bilateral fallopian tube. With, if you can see peritoneal spillage, then say bilateral fallopian tube spillage is seen. That's it. So, these are the four films which are taken. This is the early filling phase, when only the uterus is, see, only the radio contrast material has filled up the uterine cavity. Then uterus is fully distended, and some part of the fallopian tube is also distended. Now the tubal filling phase and peritoneal spillage. See, there is this peritoneal spillage. So, what are the pathologies? You can see in case of tubal block, tubal spasm, tubal polyp, hydrosalping, peritubal adhesion, salpingitis. And in case of uterine anomalies, you can see uterine fibroids, endometrial TB. There is various signs and symptoms of endometrial TB basically. And then see, non-pathological findings are some air bubbles, you can see, that is nominal, that might be there. If you do not air free the Leach-Wilkinson cannula, this complication you might arrive, that is the thing. What are the luminal filling defects? The same thing. See, air bubbles might be there, uterine folds, uterine synecdoche, endometrial polyp and submucosal fibroid. See, this is how a air bubble looks. If you do not air free the HSG cannula, this kind of a air bubbles you will find. But how will you differentiate that this is not a uterine pathology and this is a air bubble? With subsequent, first film you have taken, it is appearing. Next film you are taking, this is appearing. But on the subsequent image, this air bubble will go away, because you are pushing the dye in a forceful, the bubble will go away or the bubble will disappear, right? So, this is not a uterine pathology. See, the uterine cavity is looking absolutely normal. So, in case of uterine fibroid, see, there is some kind of a dent. So, this fibroid might be distorting the endometrial cavity. That is why there is some gaps. See, there is some gap. There is not the homogeneity of the uterine outline is lost. This cesarean scar is there. See, left-sided uterine tube is, the fallopian tube is absolutely normal and showing spillage also. But the right fallopian tube is not outlined and no peritoneal spillage is seen, indicated there is some cornual block over here. Had it been that this part of the tube is also seen, what will you say? There is some ampullary block or there is some isthmic block. So, this is a cornu. See, up to the cornu of the right sided tube you can see. After that, there is Nothing is visible. The radio opaque material is not going over here. See, this is bilateral tubal block. Only up to the corner of both the tubes you can see. After that, there is no, the tubal outline is not visible. So basically, the classification of uterine anomalies in ASRM classification. You don't need all this. So this kind of picture that might be given in the exam. See, what do you think? This is what? This is a unicornuate uterus. See, one-sided cornu is there, one-sided tube, and that tube is patent, and there is spillage also. This is uterine diadelphys. How a diadelphys looks like. See, basically it has got two uterine cavities. One sided this, one sided this. This side the tube is patent, this side the tube is not patent. That's why the tube is not visible. It's a biconnuate uterus. So there's a difference. See, this was diadelphys. Never get confused. This, see the diadelphys, and this is, see, biconnuate. Here the angle is very sharp. Now this is very acute angle. While in case of diadelphys, see, angle is obtuse angle. These two images often you guys get confused between a diadelphys and a bicornuate. See, again the angle is very sharp and this is very acute. Had it been diadelphys, the angle had been obtuse basically. See, bicornuate unicolis. Bicornuate bicolis would be two cervix basically. So more than 100-degree widely placed uterine horns with the intercornual angle greater than 100 with the uterine fundi joint at the lower uterine segment, indicating a bicornuous bicolis subtype. This is diethyl stilbestrol uterine anomaly. We say this is a T-shaped uterus. Nowadays this drug is banned. Nobody uses this drug. This anomaly is also not there. This is only used for clear cell carcinoma. Yes. It's arcuate uterus. Only the fundal part will be a bit distended. So this is septate uterus basically. See how sharply the septum is getting out. This is the forming an acute angle. See, this is septate uterus. How to differentiate between a biconnuate and a septate uterus in HSG? See, the cavities are widely separated more than 100 degrees and cavities are closely, but there will be an acute angle. HSG, however, this HSG cannot differentiate between the two. Definitive diagnosis has to be done only by MRI, where we have to measure the intervening cleft. What in case of MRI, what will you have to do is you have to measure the cleft, and if the thickness of the basically the thickness of the intervening endometrium, and if it is more than 1 centimeter, then the intercornual distance is more than 5 centimeter in case of a biconnuate uterus. See, in case of adenomyosis, what happens? So the irregularity of the uterine margins. This also you can find in case of a HSG. There is some submucosal myoma. That is why there is some filling defect inside the endometrial cavity. This is salpingitis isthmica nodosa. See, that outline of the tube is not smooth. The way in the case of a normal HSG, what we used to see is that outline of the tubes are very smooth and well defined. But here the outlines are, see, it's very hazy and they are not smooth enough. This is right-sided basically hydrosalpinx. See, the tubes are swollen. This is hydrosalpinx. This is bilateral hydrosalpinx. See, there is no spillage, but the tubes are swollen like a bag. This is hydrosalpinx. See, these are images of hydrosalpinx. Polyp hydrosalpinx again. So see, tubal ligation. See, this is uterine synecdoche formation. This is a very characteristic central overfilling defect. This is a very characteristic picture of a uterine synecdoche. There is intrauterine adhesion formation, as a result of which there is the dye cannot penetrate through this space, and there is some filling defect over it. The central oval filling defect is often representing of synecdoche formation. See another, see multiple filling defects are inside the uterine cavity. This is a case of basically Cornwall spasm. We don't get these pictures generally. See, in case of a Cornwall spasm, what will happen, you have to call the patient in the next cycle, and you give her some antispasmodic like Jortin and anything, so that this false spasm goes over, and then you do the dye test. If again you see that there is some block, then there is definitely a tubal block, because you have already given an antispasmodic, the uterine spasm has been abolished. And if you find, okay fine, there is bilateral spillage, that might have been last HSG, there was some spasm, that's why, because now you have given antispasmodic, spasm is not there, bilateral spillage is there. So last your HSG report was wrong, and she was having a false positive report of tubal block. That might be a case of uterine spasm basically. That is how you differentiate. This is a scout film. There is a normal. What I said, whenever the patient is coming, we have to take a control film. This is the control film basically. See, when no dye has been given, nothing has been given, you just take a normal picture. So HSG findings in case of genital TB, this is very important. What are the specific findings you will get in case of genital TB is beaded tube, golf club tube, pipe stain, cobblestone appearance, and leopard skin tube. These names you have to remember and identify each of them in HSG. These are very important. Whatever happens, this will be asked. The cobblestone appearance of the tube, beaded tube, golf tube. And non specific is hydrosalpinx, as we have seen. Mucosal thickening is not very much appreciated. Peritubal adhesion also not very much appreciated. And in case of uterus, this endometritis, you should know synecdoche, we have found central oval filling defect, distortion of the uterine contour, and venous and lymphatic extravasation. See, this is the characteristics of multiple rosette-like appearance. This is what? Beaded tube. See again this one. This is a cotton wool plug appearance. These are all signs and symptoms of genital TB basically. See beaded tube. See. The typical features of genital TB. See again. Golf club tube. This is also genital TB. This specific HSG appearance you should always remember. See beaded tube, golf club appearance of the tube. This another picture is of genital TB again. This is also genital TB. This is basically the hydrosalpinx which has undergone torsion. See leopard skin appearance of this is not very common, but this picture and this picture, these are very common in case of genital TB. Beaded and golf club appearance. See this is cobblestone. This is also very common in genital TB. This is a corkscrew appearance due to dense peritubal adhesion. See. Generally what happens, the tubes are lying like this, facing downwards, but due to adhesion what has happened, see the peritoneal spillage is over here. Due to this extravasation of the fluid is there, but due to adhesion these margins are very hazy, cloudy on HSG. This is a tobacco pouch appearance. This is also very common in case of genital TB. These pictures you should always remember. Another thing is that whenever you are doing an HSG, you should always remember if the patient is having a previous history of any tubal ectopic, or whether the patient is having previous history of pelvic inflammatory disease or any previous history of this tubal surgeries, then we generally do not go for HSG investigation, because we already know there is some pathology. There is some intra-abdominal pathology, there is some tubal pathology. So in HSG, better you directly go for lab dye test, laparoscopic hysterosalpingography we do rather than doing HSG. HSG is always the first investigation in case of evaluating for primary infertility. But if the patient is having a history, whether be it PID, be it tubal surgeries, be it some ectopic pregnancy, then first line investigation is not HSG, it is lab dye test or laparoscopic chromopertubation. This is the only 3 or 4 indication where you directly go for laparoscopic chromopertubation rather than going for HSG.